if people don't agree, or it feels like trying to just really trust yourself that you are a good parent, you're a good mom, you know what you're doing, even if you've never done it before.
Welcome to The Discerning Mother, the podcast for Jesus-loving moms who want to tune out the noise and tune into God's design for motherhood. I'm Bridget Tibaldi, a board-certified women's health coach, holistic health practitioner, birth nerd, and homeschooling mom of 5. I help moms to heal their minds and bodies, trust their instincts, and embrace the beauty of the way God created them. Here we talk about birth, hormones, motherhood, faith, and anything else. Let's go. And welcome back to The Discerning Mother. Today I'm here with Jane, and I'm so excited to chat. We connected on Instagram and just had things in alignment, so I wanted to reach out and see if we could come on and chat. Just a little bit of an introduction about Jane. She is a licensed clinical social worker in the DC area, working with individuals and couples primarily in the perinatal mental health space, but also is able to treat other concerns like anxiety, depression, and just support through life transitions. She lives in Maryland with her husband, 2 daughters, and 4 dogs. She said, yes, I know 4 dogs with 2 kids is insane, but I'm right there with you. We have horses, dogs, cats, all the things, so I get it. So welcome.
We're getting chickens soon, so I love it.
So welcome to the show. So glad to have you here.
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah. So why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself? I know I just read your bio, but yeah, tell us a bit about yourself.
So like you said, my name is Jane. I entered the mental health field, I guess I would say. I started doing therapy for toddlers with autism. I was in grad school getting my MSW, which I loved, but I don't know that I could do with 2 little kids at home. And I always knew I wanted to be in a school, which I also love. So I've worked in elementary, middle, and high school, and I loved it so much, but it was mentally exhausting. And then, so when I found out I was pregnant with my second, I wanted to take a step back and do something else. After I had my first daughter in 2022, I actually had a pretty smooth postpartum period, I would say, or transition. I have a ton of support. However, I will say that it was still glaringly obvious the lack of societal support or resources that I had readily available. I had some challenges with my pregnancy, and it felt I felt very dismissed a lot of the time. I didn't know a lot. Obviously I knew people. Yeah. I was the first of my friend group that had been pregnant. So most of the people that I had to lean on in my personal life were my older relatives, not old, but they hadn't been pregnant for some time. And so that was helpful, but I didn't know a lot. I didn't know what to ask for, what I had the right to. I would go in and be like, I can't walk. And they would say, yeah, that's okay, I don't know what to do about that. So after I had my first and I went back to work, I started to do perinatal therapy part-time, which I loved. I was like, this is my new passion. While I still love education and maybe I'll go back someday. It just felt like the right fit. And so when I found out I was pregnant with my second, I wanted to do it full time. And I also knew the difference from my first pregnancy to my second pregnancy. I had similar challenges, but I felt more equipped to handle them or to how to advocate. And I wanted to be able to do that for other birthing parents and couples. So that's kind of where I'm at. And so now I transitioned to a group practice, and now I have my own practice, fully virtual in DC, Maryland, and Virginia.
Very nice. Yeah. So the thing that stuck out to me when you were just talking about that is that I was the first one in my friend group and in my family to have a child. And my goodness, it's nice being the first, but it's also really hard being the first, especially if they don't other people don't start having kids right away too. At least I know for me, I felt kind of alone and I don't want to say a burden, because nobody gave that vibe or anything. Everybody was super welcoming, but just now I have this kid that I have to take around with me, even if I want to go out to dinner or something. Do you know what I mean? And so how did you navigate being that first one in your group to have a child?
I feel like it's hard to remember. I feel like I didn't immediately realize how big of a shift it was. I feel like my really good friends, not that nothing changed, obviously things change, but a lot of my best friends don't live in my immediate area. So when we did see each other, I either didn't have my kids with me or they came to stay with me. And so I felt in those really close relationships. It didn't change that much. I feel like what changed was my mindset. And also like one of my best friends, he's almost a year now, but she had a baby right after my second. And I feel like it was fine, but like there wasn't anything wrong, but she was like, I can't believe I like didn't know, like I didn't support more. And I never felt like she didn't support enough, but like it just changes your entire life. And you don't, I mean, you know that, but like it not to the extent until it happens yourself. And so I feel like, you know, it was a little bit like more after the fact that I was like, oh, I've changed the way that I navigate things. Or like, to be honest, I just like, we would have to say no to things. Like when people would ask us to go to dinner at like 7 p.m. and it's like,
I know, right? No, bedtime.
And in the beginning, I would say, we look back now and we'll like look at pictures and I'm like, we took her there. She was like 5 weeks old. Like that's insane. And it didn't feel insane at the time, but with my second, we would not have done that. Like we'd been like, we're hanging out here. Like there's no way. And so, especially when they're really young, I mean, I know people like to have them on a schedule. We were kind of like, it felt impossible. Like they'll sleep when they sleep type of thing. So in the beginning we'd be like, oh yeah, we could come at 6. Like, you know, she'll go to, cause like, and when they're really little, they'll go to sleep at 7, but then they wake up at 10. So, or, you know, it's so mixed, but as they got a little bit older and we did start to learn her routine, like now it feels we go to my parents every Wednesday and my mom doesn't get there till 6 and we're like, we got to go at 7.
Someone's bedtime.
And because they're fussy. I mean, I don't care if they stay up, but they're not pleasant to be around at that time.
Yeah,
so I feel like we just kind of like at first it was maybe hard to like say no, or we were like, people aren't going to understand. They're going to be annoyed that we can't come, or that like we go and we stay for like 2 hours instead of until we're tired, right? Like it's more based around them. So I feel like that was an adjustment. And also on my side, there are a lot of babies, but on my husband's side, we were also the first one to have kids in like quite some time. And so like that was also a little bit interesting to navigate too.
Yeah. And I actually should have asked this clarifying question first. How old are your kids?
So my oldest daughter is 3. She just turned 3. And my youngest is 15 months.
Nice. Okay. And so, yeah, I mean, it's really is tough whenever, like I said, you're the first one and nobody else is really having children. And I know whenever I've had my first 2, even like we got one meal delivered to us between the 2 kids. Really? And yes. And part of that was because like I didn't ask for it, but I think
you don't know to ask.
But that's the thing. It's like the meal that we got was from a woman in her 50s. Mm-hmm. That was my old neighbor. And so I remember I still remember that meal, and it was like the best tasting meal ever.
Yes.
Because I didn't have to cook it. It was like pasta with meat sauce and vegetables. And it was like, this is delicious. Yeah. And again, it's like seared in my mind. And so now whenever like at our church, whenever somebody has a baby, somebody is in charge of meal trains. Mm-hmm. And even if I don't know who the person is, I'm like, yes, I will make you a meal. Yep. Because it's so small. And it doesn't take that long. Like, even if it is just pasta with sauce, like not having to make your own food just makes you feel so supported. Yeah. And just takes so much off of your plate. So I don't know. Do you have like, how was your experience postpartum?
I never would have thought of that in my life. And with my first, we had so many people drop off food. They were all like my aunts and uncles, which is amazing. That's so or my cousins who had like just had babies and probably were, like, they got it for me. Or like people would have food delivered, like DoorDash, which also is great. That like did not happen at all with my second, and we missed it so much.
And that's when you really need it, whenever you have to. I was
like, because my oldest one would have eaten it too. So that was something that I remember being like, I cannot believe I've never thought that this like, and so anytime someone has a baby, whether there's a meal train or not, that my husband usually like makes something and has it or brings it to them. He's the cook in our house. I don't know. And so, and it's just like you said, it doesn't necessarily, like whenever he's done it, he'll just like make it a couple extra portions of whatever we're eating. So it's like, not exactly lift, and it makes such a big deal. So that is, I think, like the number one thing that I would say was the most helpful as well. And something I was like, I also gave me like a little toiletry bag filled with stuff for the hospital that was like chapstick, lotion, like little things that everyone's like, don't overpack, which is true. I live close to the hospital. So like, it wasn't, my husband went home if we forgot something, but it was nice to just have like those little things like that. She had had a baby 6 months before me, and she was like, these things were all helpful. So like, that was really nice too. And then we are very fortunate that we live like 5 minutes further away than my family right now. But before, we lived like literally 3 minutes away from my parents and my brother and sister-in-law. And they were there all the time, which was super helpful. So nice. And they came and like did the dishes or the laundry. Like they would be like, if you want to hand her to us, you can, but it wasn't that like expectation of like, we're coming to just hold the baby so you can do stuff. Like it was literally like anything, vacuuming. And I used to be really self-conscious in the like with our first, I was like, I don't want them cleaning our house. Like that's so embarrassing. I don't want them to think how dirty it is. And they were all like, I mean, why would you be doing that when you could be like, you could just be laying, like you're recovering and not sleeping. So that also was really helpful. So I like whenever I go to someone's house that I'm close with that just had a baby, I try, people don't, especially if it's their first, usually are like, no, sit down. But I try to be like, please let me like put in a load of laundry at a minimum, because that was also something that was helpful, because most people do, and I get it, want to come see the baby, but like there's other things that have to get done that if you're just sitting there entertaining, or like even if you're holding the baby, like especially if you're the one that gave birth, aren't necessarily up to doing things that have to get done. And so it was really nice with my second. I care. I was so grateful. I mean, I was grateful the first time, but I was also like, they're going to be like, why are they so dirty? Why haven't they done the dishes yet? And no one thought that. It was all like my own insecurities. But with my second, I was like, even if they think that, I don't care. They're doing it and I'm appreciative.
Yeah, no. Okay. So your experiences, I'm just extrapolating from what you've told me, but they sound amazing.
Yes.
I will say they sound not typical.
Correct. I would say that. Yes.
And so I know a lot of clients that I work with do struggle with that postpartum time, especially with mothers-in-laws, fathers-in-laws, like in-laws, everything like that. And just feeling not supported.
Yes.
And so I guess because we're kind of in the same realm of this, like, is that similar to what you see in your own clients of like feeling not supported, or like how?
Yes, I will say I definitely, without saying too much, felt that on to an extent. I also think it's hard. What I hear a lot of, I mean, yes, I think in-laws and even like their own, it's usually mothers. There's a lot of like, and I think it's insecurity of like thinking that if new parents are choosing to do something a different way than like they were, that like a parent did.
1,000,000%.
That is one of the most common. Well, it's like, well, you did it and I did it with you and you were fine. And it's like, that's totally fine. One, we have more research now. So like even maybe it was acceptable at the time. Like I know, for example, someone gave me a really hard time because I ran, like it wasn't a random person, but like not a family member or someone I was close with. My oldest stopped latching at 3 months. And so I exclusively pumped, and I did it for over a year, and I hated pumping. But anyway, someone was like, just give her, I was at someone's house and I like had brought 2 bottles of breast milk, or maybe 1 bottle, I don't remember. And she wanted more. And I was like, oh, I'll just go pump or something. And they were like, just give her whole milk. And she was like 5 months old. And I was like, you're not supposed to, until they're a year. And they're like, everyone's so like, has so many restrictions these days, has so many opinions. And I was like, well, one, we go to the same pediatrician that I went to. So he's been practicing for a while. And I know that my mom gave me whole milk before I was 1. And he is the same doctor telling me not to. So obviously research has told you something different. And also just because it works doesn't mean it's the best fit for I mean, that's a different situation. But like, putting your kid in daycare versus like not, or putting them in a home daycare versus center, or pumping versus formula, or, breast milk versus formula, like all the things, it's like so individualized. And so something I see with my clients a lot is that like, well, I did it, so it's okay. Or putting pressure for one decision that like the new parents feel really strongly they don't want to do, or they do want to do something a certain way, and feeling like they're being pushed into doing something different and judged for it. And that's really hard especially when it's your parent, or your spouse's or partner's parents, because you are new at it. And so a lot of new parents are like, maybe they're right. Am I doing the right thing? I've never done this before, and they've done it before. And so that's a really hard time And I think one, it doesn't feel good to be questioned, but two, when you then start to question yourself, it doesn't lead to, high confidence in yourself in terms of your parenting. And just because you're new at it doesn't mean you don't know what you're doing or you're not informed. And like, you're making an informed decision. I feel like I say this phrase like 1,000 times a day, like whatever is best safe, whatever's best for you and your family and your baby, like is all that matters, whether someone else agrees with it or not.
Yeah. And the thing that I was thinking of whenever you mentioned, like, because I hear this all the time too, is like, well, my parents said that they did it this way and I turned out fine. The thing that came up is whenever, like the McDonald's, have you seen that meme or whatever it is where it's like McDonald's in 1980 and it was like the ingredients were like tallow, salt, something else. And then it's like McDonald's in 2025 and it's like all this junk. And it's just as funny because it's like they'll say things like, well, I fed you McDonald's and you turned out fine. And it's like, yeah, but like the species that you're feeding that like now versus then is totally different. So like the environment is different.
Right.
And so that's something that I always try to hit home is like, this is not a personal attack on you or like if I'm speaking like about your mother-in-law or anybody like that. Like they did what they thought was best in the moment with the information that they had. But you are not living in that same time frame. And so, but it's so hard, especially for those, for like maybe whether it is an older generation or just a different person, it's so hard to wrap your head around the fact that like what I'm experiencing and what I want to do might be different from what you want to do because your experience is different than my experience.
Right. And it doesn't mean that like the other person's experience is wrong,
not at all.
It's always, not always, it's often taken really personally. And that is really hard. Also, when you're like in a postpartum period,
it's hard.
It's really hard to like regulate even, right? To be able to be like, I'm going to say this and it's okay if they are upset. You don't want to upset anyone. And so it's, I would say that is one of the hardest things. And like also expectations around like time with the baby is something that I see often too, or like lack of relationship with the parents and expecting a relationship with their grandchild, like in terms of with parents and in-laws, that's something that's really hard. But I would say like setting boundaries in general is something like if they want anyone else in the hospital room or not, or, trying to really emphasize the importance of their decisions as parents, because I hear often like that feels selfish to do, but I always try and remind people like if there's any time to be selfish, it's now. And also it's not selfish to like want to do what's best for you and your baby.
Yeah, for real. And also, sorry, my life is not usually this chaotic. I have a kid who's like dropping the lamp on me. This one just woke up from his nap and it's like just keeping it real, I guess.
My life is usually chaotic, so it's okay.
All right. And so you mentioned boundaries, and this is something that personally I struggled with a lot before I got some help. And it's so hard to keep your boundaries. And actually, first off, it's so hard to actually understand the concept of boundaries. So, or even to know that you need to set boundaries. So how do you like help your clients see that first they might need boundaries, and second, like what a boundary is, and third, why it's not mean to set these boundaries?
I think I say the word boundaries also like 100 times a day. And I think some clients who have never thought, like they'll be voicing things to me that they'll be like, I want this. And I'm like, well, we have to set a boundary to make that happen. And I think boundaries often have a negative connotation for people who don't necessarily have never set boundaries before, or people who would then like have to follow boundaries, right? Like are often, they don't respond well because they don't have all the control anymore. And so a lot of times clients will like be advocating to me with what they want, or like, I just wish I could do this. And I'm like, or they'll say like, is it okay for me to say like, I don't want visitors the first day I come home? And I'm like, yes. And so and then it'll be like, how do I do that? And I'm like, we have to set some boundaries. And I think like boundaries can often be such a polarizing word. And really it's just like telling people what you need, just advocating. And they're often not responded to well. Like I say this to clients, if you have to set a boundary with someone explicitly, it means that they've been benefiting from you not setting boundaries, right? And there's some boundaries that are just in general, like especially in terms of like the perinatal period, like okay, when we're in the home, like, I don't want visitors. We just want it to be us. When we come home, like, make sure and you come to visit, make sure you wash your hands, like, just like some general boundaries. But in terms of like more specific boundaries, which is what I generally work with clients on for like specific people or like specific dynamics, is a little bit harder. And it's hard. I mean, I have gotten better at it since becoming a parent, but it's still hard because people are not going to like it always. And that doesn't feel good. But trying to like also build the confidence in clients that they know that the decisions they're making for their family or for their children or for themselves are the best. And so if other people don't respond well, while you care about their emotions, it's not fair to you to be breaking boundaries just for someone else's comfort, like to put your comfort or your child's comfort aside just for someone else's comfort. And I think it does become easier. I've noticed with myself and also with clients, the older your children get, the easier it gets because you get more confident in the ability to do so. But two, they start to maybe like have cues or set their own boundaries. Like my oldest is super shy around new people, or even like honestly people that she knows very well, but just like right when she sees them. And so in the beginning, I used to feel very much like, I don't want to tell them to like back off or like give her space because I don't want them to think she doesn't like them. And then now I'm like, okay, she clearly is uncomfortable. I don't really care if they're upset because I don't want her to be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And like that becomes easier, one, with time, but two, because I can physically see that she's like uncomfortable and I have to be her voice. And I don't care. Not that I don't care. I don't want people to be upset, but also like she's a 3-year-old. And so adults should be able to manage like a 3-year-old is feeling shy. And now she actually like, we have been working on emotion words. She'll be like, I'm feeling shy right now. And so I'll be like, but she still doesn't know to say like, please stop asking me to take a picture or, whatever it is. But I think that like, obviously time helps, but the identifying the boundary is usually clients are saying, I want to do this. I don't want them to do this. And then it's like, okay, what do you need? Like if you, in your perfect world, what would you need to make that happen? Like, would it be they don't come over every single day? Would it be that like when they do come over, they do this or, whatever it is, they wear a mask around I had one client that was like, is it okay if I tell people they have to wear a mask? And I was like, yes, your baby's born during like RSV, flu, and COVID season. Like, even if they weren't, you can do whatever you want in your house with your baby. And then practicing language to use is super important. And then we can't control how they'll respond. They might respect your boundary. They might not. If they do, great. And if they don't, like what is within your control to make sure the boundary is still being met? So does that mean that like you ask them to leave? Does it mean like, okay, then I'll hold the baby, you can stay here, but like if you aren't going to wash your hands, then you can't hold the baby. Like there are, what are things that you can do if someone is not respecting your boundary, and trying to like bring the control, realizing they have the control of their postpartum experience and their baby's life and health and safety, and also social emotional well-being too. Yeah.
And one thing that I feel like is kind of like a buzzword or like a buzz topic nowadays is like the idea of people pleasing. And I was talking to somebody, I forget where I was, but I was just out randomly, and she was talking to me about her son who's 5 years old, who has ODD. So opposition, or you would know this better because it's not my wheelhouse.
Oppositional defiant disorder.
Yes. Okay. And so again, he's a 5-year-old little boy. He goes to public school. And so he's in whatever program they have, and they've diagnosed him with this. And so she was just talking to me about it because I don't know that much about it. We homeschool our kids, so I don't really interact with the public school at all. And so she was saying how what she's trying to do now, instead of trying to be like the more like aggressive parent and like yelling at him and that sort of thing, because he doesn't respond to that. She is trying to instead, whenever he does something that's mean or bad or whatever, she like puts on a pouty face and like she's like, oh, you made me feel sad. And to me, that just doesn't seem to make much sense, because I feel like you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like that is putting her feelings on a 5-year-old little boy who can't even control.
Responsible.
Yeah, and he can't
making her feel better or controlling her emotions.
Yes, and it's like he can't even regulate his own emotions. Like he should not have to regulate your. Obviously, she's like faking it, but still, it's like he doesn't know that, and so.
Yeah.
How do we, as parents, not raise another generation of people pleasers? Like, obviously, we want to raise kind, honest, humans, but that also means that we're kind to ourselves and that we can stand up for ourselves in a nice, not even nice, but in a way that feels authentic and is going to keep us safe and our families safe. Like, how do we do that?
Yeah, I think it's hard. I mean, I'm definitely not an expert, but
I'm
trying my best. I think that another buzzword is gentle parenting. And I don't necessarily say I'm a gentle parenter. I think that my husband is a teacher. He also used to do therapy with kids with autism. We both have backgrounds in education and mental health. And so I think we're also just more in touch with our emotions and how certain topics or strategies in general. And so I think we're not necessarily subscribing to a type of parenting necessarily. We're just kind of doing what feels right, which often it sounds aligns with gentle parenting when I see things about gentle parenting, which I think is often misconstrued as permissive parenting, which is not the same thing.
That's my
because we still have expectations and boundaries with her. I say her, the older one, the younger one is starting.
Not at that age yet.
It's starting to maybe need some, but it's different. But I've even found, I was saying in the beginning, earlier, I found that when my daughter is shy and not wanting to go up, and people are you don't want to give me a hug. And I felt I found myself being it's okay, they're safe. And then I was no, if she doesn't want to, she doesn't want to. And it's not personal. And if this adult cannot
understand
handle or understand that a toddler or young child doesn't want to have physical affection with every single person that they see, then that's okay. Because I mean, it does feel silly, right? To be oh, we need to teach consent to a 3-year-old. And it's I'm not actively being this is what consent means necessarily in this moment. But I also don't want her to think that this person is sad, so she has to give them a hug. And so you said, I mean, it goes much deeper than even consent, but people pleasing in general, I don't know that anyone in my life would consider me a people pleaser anymore. But I used to have a lot of anxiety when I was little. And some of it was I didn't want to make people feel bad. I mean, I'm a therapist because I do want people to feel I like people to feel happy and I don't want people to be upset with me. But I also am learning still to not put others' comfort before mine. And I think you said, in general, that's kind of we've been taught to do that, right? To make sure other people are happy over ourselves or not necessarily take into consideration. And so, I mean, we do a lot of labeling emotions too. If my daughter, she's honestly I think we're pretty lucky. She's a very she's a rule follower, I will say. She will throw a fit and then do it anyway. But even when she's I don't want to do something, or she's really upset, she's started stomping her foot, which is really hard not to laugh at. But we'll be wow, it seems you're really upset. Here's what I do when I'm upset. So yesterday she asked me how I was and I was I'm feeling overwhelmed. And she was why don't we take a deep breath? I didn't know you paid attention to me when I did that. So I've just been trying to we do a lot of modeling. I would say naming emotions. And also, this doesn't happen often, but when you were saying about that kid, if he does something mean, especially if it's to another child. So if my oldest pull something away from my youngest. My youngest I think is just used to it, so it wouldn't even work to be she's so sad. But instead of doing that, we try to be oh, are you okay? To my younger one, to model, when you do something that hurts or upsets someone, here's how you can repair it, versus you now are responsible for their emotions. Because I think it's a fine line and balance to find. And we're not going to do it perfect all the time. Allowing kids to have their emotions, even if it's hard for you, which takes a lot of regulating your own emotions, right? And I think, putting the other people's emotions onto the child is a slippery slope, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I have 2 things to say about what you were just talking about. So the first one is that I don't love the gentle parenting, because I think it was hijacked by that permissive parenting. Yes. And so to me, whenever I hear gentle parenting, I think yes, man, do whatever you want. When in reality, gentle parenting is really just how we're supposed to parent.
Yes, I think that's how I feel.
Common sense, teaching respect, being respectful, setting boundaries, sticking to those boundaries. And that just goes for that's just how all of our relationships should be.
Exactly. It's not even just related to parents.
No, it's that's how we should treat each other. And that's like, we treat each other with respect. And obviously, like, my 3-year-old's going to have different boundaries than my almost 9-year-old.
Right.
And that's just how people should be too, where it's like the person that I meet at the grocery store is going to have different like boundaries than my husband. Like, it's just that's what makes sense to me. And that's what like we try to model, is just we respect everybody and we like respect everybody else's boundaries and to the best of our ability.
And also setting realistic expectations for yourself with their developmental level. Like, it's like, and that's hard sometimes, right? Especially like my 3-year-old is like, sometimes she talks to me in like 5-paragraph essays. Like, I would talk and I could have a conversation with her. Like, I could have a conversation with an adult. And then other times I'm like, reminded, you're a 3-year-old. You know, and it's sometimes when she switches so quickly, I'm like, I know you understand what's going on. But it's like, that's developmentally appropriate for her. And so like trying to remind myself of like, she doesn't know how to regulate her emotions. Yeah. I should know how to regulate my emotions. So, you know, and then also the other thing is like, we try and make a lot of like, I don't, you know, I think the authoritarian mindset is I always get authoritative mixed up. But like, if we're saying we need to go, like we're at a park and we need to leave, sometimes I've had to pick her up because she's not cooperating. But like, you know, if she doesn't immediately get off and the swing and come to me or like come towards the car, I try to be like, can you beat mom to the car? Or like, how fast can you run? And like 9 times out of 10, she does it, right? Like, I try not to take it personally where I'm like, oh, she didn't listen to me, so like she's being defiant.
No, she's being a little kid.
Right. And sometimes, you know, like, no. And then I'm like, I can pick you up. And then she stares at me and I pick her up. But, and like, sometimes that happens. But like, instead of, you know, yelling and being like, you need to listen to me, that's not helpful. Like, and she's like, I don't need to listen, you know, like they don't necessarily know what that means. And so, you know, it's a fine line. And I think I'm interested to see what this generation of children will feel like too, like, and how in touch emotions they'll be.
And that was the other thing I was going to say, is that we had my group call last week, and we somehow got on the topic of like feeling your feelings, like being allowed to feel your feelings and not just think about your feelings, because so many of us just like logically know what we're feeling, and which is good, but we don't actually allow ourselves the time and the space to process what we're feeling.
Yeah.
So especially in like the work that I do and you do, is like there can be a lot of grief, there can be a lot of fear, anger, shame, guilt, whatever.
Yeah.
And a lot of times we just know that we have those feelings, but it's like okay, like I've dealt with it, like I'm good.
Like, what do I do with it?
Yeah. But in reality, it's like you didn't actually deal with it. You're just like saying, thank goodness I have a healthy baby. Like everything's good. Like, thank goodness this, or thank goodness that. When in reality, it's like, you're allowed to be mad that maybe you had that like emergency C-section, or you're allowed to be angry that maybe your husband was, this is me personally speaking, that your husband was eating a cheeseburger whenever like you're in labor. And
and especially when it comes to like birth trauma or unexpected like situations during birth, like you're allowed to grieve what you wanted for your birth experience, even if technically there was no, like, you know, like you said, your baby's fine, they weren't in the NICU, you're safe and healthy, you all went home together. Like, even if all of those things are true, you're allowed to feel whatever you feel because it looked different than what you wanted. Even if you know it had to look different, you know, for the safety of you and your baby, it's still, you're allowed to grieve that. I mean, it is, or like mourn it. Like, it is a loss that you didn't get to have. Yeah, for sure. And I mean, think about whenever you actually do grieve that, like what that does for yourself in terms of like your physical body, and like your body starting to process that and starting to feel safe again, like your nervous system starting to regulate. But also think about like what that does for your family, because if they can see that, like, I'm thinking again, if you have older children or even just your husband, whatever, like mom went through something that was really hard and really scary, and like maybe she had some pretty negative feelings around it, and maybe she cried and screamed and yelled or whatever. Yeah. But then she also took the time to go and like sit and like process, or even like working with somebody to process it. Like, she took that time to do that thing. Like, think about the effect that has on children seeing that, or even husbands seeing that, or family members seeing that, like that
like you have given yourself permission to feel the feelings and feel the feelings and move forward from the feelings, because that might be a model for somebody that doesn't even realize that they have their own feelings that they need to be feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's something that a lot of validation in my work. And I think, something that, and not, related to birth trauma too, but even just like postpartum, not just, even like postpartum depression, where it's like, I think I love my baby, but it's not an immediate, like I'm overfilled with love, and like feeling guilt that you're not feeling that, or like feeling guilty that you're not just grateful that your baby is alive and healthy, right? Like there's all these, like, I think moms already have a tremendous amount of guilt internally that they put on themselves. And then to have these other things where it's like, there's things going on that, like postpartum anxiety, postpartum depression, PTSD, or just like that, the transition period after birth, like even if it's not a clinical diagnosis, there's so many feelings and emotions that come, and a lot of them are not positive. Some of them are, and some of them aren't. And when people are experiencing the negative sides, they often don't talk to people because it feels like there's something wrong with them for not talking about it.
Sure.
And I think, we are doing, I remember when my husband and I would always say, like, why did no one talk about like how, like, even just when I was pregnant, how like horrible this is. Like I did not like being pregnant. I hated it so much. I had only heard my whole life, everyone I knew loved being pregnant. It's so beautiful, blah, blah, blah. And like, really the only thing that was cool about or that I like enjoyed about being pregnant was when I would feel her kick. Like every other part, I was like, I'm never doing this again. And I did it again because something in but I was like, we're doing women a disservice by not like normalizing these feelings. Like I felt like I wanted to be pregnant so bad, and now I'm like dreading it. I'm like so annoyed that I'm pregnant every day. And it was, to me also, it's hard. Like the pregnancy is so separate. Like even right when she was born, it was so separate. Like obviously they're related, but it didn't feel like it to me because I hated being pregnant and I loved her so much immediately. And I think like that is obviously not everyone feels that, but some people love being pregnant. And then when the baby's born, don't have that immediate, like overwhelming love.
Yeah, for sure.
Connection. And that is, there's just so many, it's a fine line between like scaring people into not being pregnant or like, it's going to be the worst, but also like creating a realistic expectation of what it can be, that it's not all sunshines and rainbows, because it's just not. Like, even if you loved being pregnant, there's hard things that came with it. It just is the reality of the situation. And and that's part of what got me into this work. I just felt like I had a good time, and I had like, in terms of support, and like, I didn't have that challenging of a time. And I was like, why did no one tell me all these weird things that happen or all these hard things? And so I could only imagine people who don't have support or who had like really significant health concerns while being pregnant or birth trauma. And so like, that's also like a lot of what led into my work with like, without scaring women, also being honest and validating what they're feeling.
Well, I think part of that too is that, and this is something that I'm like trying to preach more, because personally I feel this, is that birth is not normalized in our culture.
No, it's not.
And so it's not something that we are exposed to until it happens to us, like ourselves.
Absolutely.
And so, but like back in the day, it was like normal. Like it was normal to go over to your sister's house whenever she was having a baby, and you would sit there for 3 days, just like supporting her. Mm-hmm. And it was normal. It was normal to have like the neighbor down the road come and help you, like whenever the birth came, or watch your kids or whatever. And so it used to be normal. It used to not be scary. It used to just be something that happened.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't this big medical event or anything like that. It was just normal. And nowadays, at least from the women that I've talked to, it's sort of on this spectrum of two different ways, where it's like the one way is it's this like beautiful, like dimly lit, twinkle lights everywhere, affirmations all over the wall, the birth tub, like everything like that, which, don't get me wrong, is absolutely beautiful.
Yeah.
But then there's this other side of the spectrum that more people fall into because they don't know about this other side of the spectrum. And that the other side of the spectrum is the like seeing it on TV where it's like the woman rushing into the hospital, like knees up to her ears, like screaming as she's pushing, the doctor like in the hazmat suit, touching the baby. And then, or if it's not that, then it's like her laid out on the table with the C-section thing up. And it's like, so it's like these way too, like two extremes. When in reality, most of the time, it's kind of right down the middle, where it's like this beautiful but really hard event, like this.
Yeah.
It's, I don't want to say scary, but this event that like you've never gone through before, but like you know that like your body knows how to do it. Like that's what should be normal. But we have these like two different sides of the spectrum.
Yeah.
And so that's something that I feel like we as a culture need to adjust. Otherwise, like we really are doing women a disservice. Yeah. Because they're so fearful going into pregnancy, like, of the pain and everything like that. When in reality, like, yeah, it can be painful, but if you go in with a different mindset about it, I'm not saying it's going to be like perfect.
Right.
Sometimes moms need help. Sometimes babies need help. Like sometimes things happen. Yeah. But if we can just shift our mentality a little bit, and not even just as the women who are giving birth, but as the people supporting the women who give birth. Yeah. Like that can change so much.
Yeah. And even just like, I think, you know, like you said, like a lot of women don't, especially if it's their first, like don't know what all the options are, like what they have available. Like maybe you do want to go to a birth center. Maybe you want to give birth at home. Maybe you are more comfortable in a hospital, and just like having more access to that information from providers so that, you know, women and families can make the decision that makes the most sense for them. And of course, like if something comes up, like they have information to shift their decisions if needed, because like you said, like there's medical things that do come up, but that doesn't happen for everyone. And so just giving, you know, women and families like the opportunity to have access to the information that is available of like, or even just like prenatal care that like, you know, chiropractic care or physical therapy, acupuncture, like what are the things that, like when I went in for my second pregnancy and I was feeling the same like pelvic pain, I was like, last time they told me there was nothing they can do, and that I'm just not doing that. Like there's gotta be something. I know it's going to hurt, but like I'm so much earlier and I literally can't turn over in bed. Like I'm not, there's got to be something. And my provider at that time was much better, but I also I advocated more, but like, it's just not acceptable to say, sorry, that's just is what it is. Like, even if it's like, there's going to be some pain, but let's try this, you know, it's like, dismissive nature of a lot of things without additional information. And yes, women could go and research on their own theoretically, but like there's a lot going on. And also you don't know what information is credible or not, or like what makes the most sense for you. And so like to have a team of like a support team that can give you referrals or information is also invaluable. And I don't think there's enough of that.
Yeah, for sure.
And like you said, because a lot of things aren't normalized, they're so medicalized, or even if like, you know, you need to be in a medicalized setting, like there's still information that I think is not as accessible as it should be.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. And then the other thing I wanted to ask you, because you do work with clinical like postpartum depression, anxiety, rage. So actually one little like anecdotal thing is that in my lay midwifery training, the woman who I did the training with, she called it like day 2 was like the Rambo day, where it's like she had 7 children and her hormones like went crazy on day 2 or 3, which is normal. Mm-hmm. And like that was her like Rambo day, where she was like, I just want to watch Rambo and like have all these feelings. And then it's like, and then she was like, and then I would crash and I would feel like the worst person ever. And I'd scream at my husband. I'd be like, do I even like this person? Like, why did we do this? Like all these different thoughts. And, but then eventually, obviously your hormones level out. And so one of her big things that she really taught us is that like postpartum depression, anxiety, rage, PTSD to some extent, her saying was like, your reactions are reasonable due to an unreasonable situation. Mm-hmm. So like the way that you are like, because you're experiencing this postpartum depression, it's a reasonable reaction to this environment that is not supportive or reasonable. So how do you feel about that?
I would agree with that. Yeah, I would agree with that. And I also think like the other thing is that just because you experience that like crash or like, especially in the very beginning, doesn't necessarily mean postpartum depression or postpartum anxiety. Mm-hmm. Like the length of time and also severity, like really tie into that. Like a lot of women that I work with, I would say like they have like the postpartum blues, right? Which is not a diagnosis. And most women like after 2 weeks are like, yeah, this is hard, but it doesn't feel like the like overwhelming grief or like lack of connection with baby. And like, like I said, like the longevity of it is definitely different, but I think that is totally true. Like it is an unreasonable circumstance. And so, I mean, just the hormone drop alone is like insane.
Yeah.
And that alone could make anyone like, could cause so many reactions, emotions, and things like that. On top of, like you said, like the lack of adequate support that a lot of women feel, or like some people have babies that are really colicky and cry all the time and don't ever sleep. And like, that's unreasonable, right? To not be getting sleep. Yet, of course, is like a normal part of a newborn. But if you don't have that adequate support, or not even adequate, if you don't, I would say adequate, but like if you don't have or you don't have access to information, it feels like I'm a bad mom because they won't stop crying. I'm a bad partner because I can't get my baby to sleep, or I'm asking my husband to get up and, with the baby at night, and I should be doing that. And so like, I think that makes a lot of sense. And it is a reasonable response to an unreasonable situation, even though it feels unreasonable to you that you're having this reaction. And I think a lot of that too is like, I'm supposed to love this period of time. This is supposed to be amazing. And my baby's supposed to be perfect. And I should just be happy that the baby's here. And maybe those things are true. And it's also like the hardest thing to navigate with like one of the things that like is the starkest shift in your life. And so of course, like your physiological needs aren't even being met. Of course, your emotional regulation is going to be off.
Yeah. Okay. No, so good. And that was something that I definitely felt of, is like something's wrong with me because I'm feeling like this. And like looking back, I want to be like, no, nothing was wrong with you. Like you just needed extra help, and that's okay. Yeah. But in that moment, it feels like you are the worst and like you're not doing a good job. But again, it's just, you might just need extra support, and that's okay.
Yeah.
It doesn't say anything about you. It doesn't say anything about like your husband or child or anything like that. Yeah. It's just, again, kind of back to that environment thing where it's like, maybe you just need more support, and that's fine.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of like, well, I'm the mom, I should be able to do it. And it's like, sure, maybe, but you don't have to. Like, you shouldn't have to do it alone. Like,
well,
you're the mom and you can do a lot of things. You can probably do all of it, and you shouldn't have to. Like, it's not, I mean, I think, everyone says like it takes a village to raise a child. And I think like that is true. And a lot of women don't have that village, or even parents in general don't necessarily, like some people do. Like I'm very lucky that I do. And it was still very hard, I mean, it's just a hard time in your life. And so without that, like you said, you just needed more support. And it doesn't mean you're not a capable parent. It just means that you shouldn't have to do it all on your own.
Yeah. And with that too, I have this one client in particular whose son is having trouble sleeping. And so she's exhausted because she's also pregnant and like just a lot of stuff going on. And she was chatting and she was like, is it okay if I ask for help with this? Like, I feel like I'm ruining him and like I did something wrong. And I'm like, yes, ask for help, because just because you are his mom, and like your intuition is so good, but sometimes it is helpful to have somebody with more experience come in and just support you, not tell you what to do, not tell you to do this, that, or the other thing, not to like say that you're doing this wrong or that wrong, but just to like support you and maybe give you a different perspective on things.
Yeah.
And like, that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think like, is it okay to ask for help is like, it makes me so sad I'm like, of course, please ask for help. Like, even if you don't have family nearby, like there are people that like do this for a living to support you. And so if needed. And so, like I said, I get questions all the time from clients that feel like so obvious to me. Like when I say like, is it okay if I tell people they have to wash their hands? And I'm like, you can tell them to do whatever you want, right? Like my sister-in-law said to us one time, like, if you told me I had to like bounce up and down on one foot and jump in a circle to hold her, I would be like, that's weird, but sure, right? Because you're the parents. And so I'm very lucky to have people in my life like that, but to feel like you can't ask for support, you can't ask for things that you need, and having a client ask me that and being like, yes, I can just see the relief of like, okay, I'm not being difficult, or I do know what I'm doing. And so I think like, that's why this work is so important, to normalize that. Cause I would, I don't want any person to feel like they can't ask for help. And one of like the hardest time, like I said, like postpartum and even pregnancy is such a difficult time we kind of just act like we don't have paid family leave in this country. And so that is like indicative of the expectation of, it's not that hard. You can go back to work after 6 weeks. Right.
Oh,
And
right.
so I think like there's a lot of systemic issues, but like anything that like I can do to normalize, like, yes, please ask for help. Please do ask for what you need is like a good starting place. Like even that feels, like a little bit that I can do to help people.
Well, and one thing that I try to work on with clients is like reframing it. So even if you are like kind of nervous to ask for help, like with this one client in particular, I was like, think about your mom. She had 5 children. Mm-hmm. And she went through many nights of getting a baby to sleep. And also, this is her grandchild. Like, how amazing would it feel to be able to hold a baby and like get them to sleep again? Because she hasn't been able to do that in 25 years. Like, think about the gift that you're giving her, and just like kind of shifting that narrative a little bit where it's like, it's a gift to be able to ask, especially some older people would like love to be asked for, like, to feel needed again.
Yeah.
And not saying that like you need to do that to make them feel better, but just if it's helpful to think of it that way, like it can really shift and like try to help you ask for that support.
Yeah absolutely.
All right, so last question is, what's the most important piece of advice or wisdom that you'd share with the discerning mother?
Kind of like what I've already said, to an extent of like, trust your instinct in like what you think is best for you and your family and your baby is what's best, even if people don't agree, or it feels like trying to just really trust yourself that you are a good parent, you're a good mom, you know what you're doing, even if you've never done it before. And, it's okay to make mistakes. You're, like we talked about before, what worked before might not work in the future. And that's okay. Like, just do the best with the information you have now and what feels like the best, and have some confidence in yourself that you're a good parent.
Yeah, no, that's so good. So hard to do, but so good.
It is hard to do. I've gotten better at it myself, but it's still hard for me, to feel that way sometimes too.
All right. Well, we could keep chatting for a long time, but how can people find you, reach out to you, all the things?
Yes. So my practice is called Newtown Wellness. You can find me newtownwellness.com. Also Newtown Wellness on Instagram, or my email is jane@newtownwellness.com.
All right. Well, thank you so much, especially with
so much.
Some kid stuff going on here. I appreciate it. But thanks so much. This was a great conversation. I can't wait for everybody to hear it. So we'll talk to you guys later.
Thank you so much. Bye. If people don't agree, or it feels like trying to just really trust yourself that you are a good parent, you're a good mom, you know what you're doing, even if you've never done it before yourself,